Good morning and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting. We have a couple of apologies, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Zaman, but if other members of the committee would like to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Harpreet. I'm the lead member for the Economies and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Panel.
Andrew Marchington, and I'm going to be taking over from Cathal Burke for the Children's Scrutiny at the next council meeting.
And I'm Councillor Liz Mage, and I'm chairing the Management Committee panel. And we do have an observer from Huddersfield University this morning. Thank you. Welcome. Right, okay. So minutes of the previous meeting. We've just a slight problem with the microphone. Sorry about that. All right. So the minutes of the last meeting. I'm not sure. I think there's only me here that was actually at the meeting. But do we agree the minutes? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Right. Do any councillors have any interests they wish to declare at this time? No. Thank you. And all items are to be taken in public this morning. So, item 5, which is the allocation of scrutiny co-optees from the 1920 municipal year. So on page 8, there's the proposed allocations of the scrutiny co-optees for the I think it is this municipal year, even though it says 18-19, I think that's a tad bit mistake. But as you can see, each panel, it's proposed that we have some co-optees on there. So do we agree that the allocation of co-optees for this year? Thank you. There are some that won't be continuing. So Fatima Shah Khan resigned as a statutory co-optee during the year due to work commitments. Kimberly Stock, Mark Mercer and Sharon Taylor are also stepping down for voluntary co-optee roles during the year. So our thanks to everybody who contributed to the works of the panels, and thank you to those that have stepped down this year, and thank you to those who are continuing. Okay, thank you. Right, item 6 is the re-establishment of the ad hoc scrutiny panel, elective home education. We need to re-establish this panel as it's the start of the municipal year. It has been ongoing for a little while, and so it is proposed that this is restarted but reviewed after 4 months. Is that okay with panel members? Yes, thank you. And also that the consideration be given to the membership of the scrutiny panel, and the lead member for children's scrutiny obviously needs to be on that. But I think if we continue with, okay, and we continue with as many members as we can that have been involved, so there's no new work to go over, and it can just continue and finish. Okay. And a progress report is brought in October. All right, thank you. Right then, we move to item 7 on the agenda, which is the scrutiny work programme. Welcome to Jackie Gedman. And Rachel, are you here for this item and the corporate plan, or are you sort of doing both? Right, as well. Okay, so we've got quarter 3 performance and quarter 4 performance. I think we probably have some questions on that. And also we've got the forward plan of key decisions. And the idea is for us to look at the performance, look at the forward plan, and then we'll discuss the draft work plans. Okay. All right. So have you got anything you want to say before we start, or no? You're okay. We'll just continue. All right then. So if we look at the performance first, then. All right. Okay. So in your papers at page 39 is the quarter 3 performance, and the quarter 4 performance was a separate report. So if we go through then, Does anybody have any questions on the Q3 performance or the Q4 performance? If I start off then, because I've got a few questions. On both performance reports, there is sort of a feeling that everything is okay, everything is all right. But there's not a lot about the risks to outcomes on the performance reports. So there's a few things that have been on there that, for instance, at page 43, it says there's an urgent need for an IT system. And in Q4 there's been no resolution. It still says that there's an urgent requirement for an IT system. But that's not identified as having any potential impacts. Why would that be? Why wouldn't there be anything on the performance reports that says actually we may run into difficulty with this, it may take us longer, or actual fact we've solved that problem?
Okay, thank you. I think there's a couple of things that's probably just worth commenting on before we get into the detail of the question. But for me, the Council's in a year of transition in terms of moving from a data-led organisation, which is not focused on outcomes, more around outputs. And we are, the performance system that you've got in front of you is one that we're definitely moving towards. So what difference does that make then to local people? I think what we've got at the moment is work going on in the local areas, which we refer to as place-based working, whereby we know that we're still achieving results, but we could do more if we could integrate further and if we could ensure that we had better systems. So I think the reason it doesn't talk about the impact is because actually it's not on a day-to-day basis affecting us. It's kind of, as we move to clarifying what we're trying to achieve on an outcome basis, that's when the technology would be very, very helpful.
And is that why there's sort of no real timescales in it as well, or milestones that you have to reach or anything?
Yeah, and I mean, I think having a quarterly performance report that is trying to show progress against those strategic level outcomes is always quite tricky, because clearly if we can actually turn the curve on those outcomes, sometimes it's not going to show in one quarter, let alone the whole year in some cases. So we're trying to get that balance right between those things that we want to identify as being actually the progress against those outcomes will be impacted by this particular measure, whilst also saying that actually fundamentally the outcome itself won't be affected by something like that. In terms of capturing risk, I do think there is something that's helpful that you've raised in terms of trying to get some of that a bit more visible in terms of where it will impact on those outcomes. But as Jackie said, I think in terms of its day-to-day impact, it's more about flagging up that we're looking at that. And I suppose what it doesn't necessarily reflect is that there'll be work going into the background to try and work out what that IT system will look like and how it better connects against all those outcomes, rather than it being something specific to one service area. Because all the time we've got to ask ourselves that question in terms of how we work in a more cross-council way and less siloed in one specific area.
So do you want to go through the sheets, the different sections of the plan? Yeah. Andrew, did you have a question?
We're going through best starts first anyway, but I did have a question on that. So the Q3 report, we've got the first bullet point, the key highlight about being a national trailblazer for mental health support in schools. Obviously there's a national issue about it and highlighting, not just in Kirklees, but issues around mental health for young people across the country. So I'm just wondering how we're going to monitor progress on that. I'm trying to compare with what's in Q3 and what's in Q4, and actually over a longer term, how are we going to make sure that in terms of mental health we're going to get the best start for our children and young people? Yep.
I think the mental health trailblazer stuff, as you said, it's a national initiative that we've applied for and been successful in achieving. We've also put in for phase 2 so that we can make sure it's more sustainable, because obviously one of the big risks about some of these initiatives is that they are quite short term, and if we're talking about genuinely impacting on outcomes, it needs to be longer. What we've tried to do with that is incorporate it into the whole Healthy Child programme, so the sort of pre-birth right through to 19, and for children with special educational needs that goes up to 25. It's incorporated in the work that we're doing around improving access to CAMS, and also trying to get school nursing staff and other professionals within schools to recognise emotional health and well-being, as well as that being picked up by all practitioners who work with children and young people. So we will look at monitoring the impact of that through the monitoring of the Thriving Kirklees contract, which we've got with Locala, and make sure that it's having a demonstrable impact both in terms of CAMS waiting times and on highlighting those issues earlier. I think the difficulty with something like emotional health and well-being is that a lot of it is unmet needs, so we don't know what the levels of emotional health and well-being are out there, and partly this will probably see a spike in people needing more support because we're identifying things earlier, which from my perspective is always a positive thing, because we need to be picking those things up. So the impact of that programme will be looked at through the national criteria, but we will also look at it locally and how it integrates with the other support that we're providing around mental health and well-being for children and families.
So a quick follow-up, because obviously there's stuff on the news this morning about nationally training all teachers to pick up issues around mental health with children and young people. Is that a new initiative, or does that actually complement on the trailblazing stuff?
To be honest, I don't know exactly how it complements. I would hope it would in terms of the national agenda. From a local perspective, partly the model is about every contact counts, so that actually anybody who's in contact with children and families are trained and can recognise any of those signs. And actually, recognising is one thing, but knowing where to get their support for them is the next thing. So we need to make sure the whole system is equipped in doing that. Because in my view, if we get people trained in understanding the signs, that's fine. But if we've got nothing to actually provide to support them, that's not going to change anything. So it's about looking at that a lot more holistically.
So I think when we get to the corporate plan, I think we'll see that the performance report reflects your corporate plan in that the sections are the same, and it pulls in the items from the corporate plan, doesn't it, and says what your progress is against that. So the best start area, has anybody got any?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to pick up a couple of things from the exec summary as well, and thank you. And I do agree with what Liz has said in terms of measuring progress and looking at how we evaluate. I see what you're saying about how do you do that actually on a short-term and long-term process. I think it's perhaps just worth us having a think about how do we do that, or how do we make it clearer in the reports that actually we need to be looking at this at a longer-term basis or on a short-term basis. So just so we're being very transparent about that really. Just a couple of things I wanted to pick up on. You'd say in the exec summary that 180,000 has been secured from the Home Office to develop prevention and early intervention work to reduce gang-related violence in Kirklees. Obviously, this is a key issue, not just in Kirklees, but nationally. Obviously, you know, a lot of places are facing this, and a lot more towns are seeing this as an issue, whereas it used to be in the cities. But this is something I would like to see a lot more understanding of what we're doing with the police and that partnership approach, because it can't just be a lock-em-up approach, can it really? So I'd like a better understanding of that, and how are we evaluating actually how our gang strategy is working, and how does it fit in with the place-based approach as well. And I think that probably links in with the permanent exclusions perhaps as well, which is seen in increase, and I know that's in both Q3 and Q4. So perhaps getting a better understanding of where that's coming from. I don't know if we've got a good understanding of that at the moment or not.
Certainly, I can, and in terms of what we're doing across the council around gangs, you're right to raise it in terms of one of the key areas of focus for us as an authority going forward. I think the funding itself, obviously, again, small pockets of money will help to kind of prime some of the activity that we're doing. What the two safeguarding boards and the communities board are looking at is how we can ensure we've got maximum benefit for delivering that gang strategy. You'll have probably seen in the news that they're trying to take what they've classed as a public health approach to dealing with youth violence and gangs. essentially that gives you a nice framework to work with. So building on the success of the Youth Summit that we had earlier on in the year, we're looking at trying to work on a practice model that helps us to be really clear about our various responsibilities and how we maximise that partnership work to tackle that gang violence, because for me prevention is always better than cure. And actually we've got a huge amount of voluntary and community capacity out there who are wanting to do something around this area, and it's making sure that we can get our practitioners working in the best way to maximise that. So we'll be updating in the performance report how that progress is happening, and it will also come through the partnership arrangement.
And just to add to that, I think you're right about this is intrinsic to place-based working, and we have got to, over the next 12 months, really understand local places, what the opportunity is, and tie some of these initiatives back rather than do them at a strategic level and not, make good use of local people, local politicians who understand what's happening in the local area. So that's kind of where the challenge is for us. But we're starting a review in September around all the staff who work in local places to make sure that we've got it all connected back together.
Right, best start then. Well, has anybody got anything under well? I think one of the things that is noticed is that the cameras numbers are rising. And so I think that's another thing that is in, and there's something on Community Plus as well that says the introductions are lower in battling spend. It says it in Q3, it says it in Q4, but there's nothing there that says how you're going to, to resolve it. So, okay, it's rising, the introductions are lower, but where are you in relation to that? So maybe that might be something that wants to be picked up. So the next one I think is Aspire and Achieve. Anything on there? No? When you're looking at voluntary and community sector work across the board, have you got a piece of work, did you say you got a piece of work coming up to look at how that is working on the voluntary and community sector? Because I think that's something that we would want to pick up on as well. Right, sustainable economy. This is regeneration things. You've got something, you've got a lot of work on regeneration. Do you want to outline?
I suppose just on the regeneration front, I think that we, in terms of the Council's priorities for the next couple of years, there's a huge amount of work and effort going on around master plans for both Huddersfield and for Dewsbury. I know that Cabinet are very keen that actually investment goes into other towns and villages and plans are developed to enable that to happen. I think I shouldn't underestimate the size of the challenge around the regeneration of some of the town centres, given what's happening with retail and leisure opportunities. So I think there is a huge need to do something quite bold and different, and I know that the Cabinet are very keen that over the next 12 months we make progress on that, and it's really clear to members of the public particularly about the kind of things that we've got in view for our vision for the towns going forward.
Thank you for that. Obviously, the town centre, the Huddersfield Town Master Plan is going to be coming to our panel, economy and neighbourhood panel in July. I think one of the key things that's come up definitely last year was around engagement. So how we're engaging with local businesses, or local stakeholders, and how they're playing a part in building that master plan. I don't know if you can say a bit about that.
So I think engagement is hugely important, and we've seen actually through some of the work that's been happening in Huddersfield around trying to get a business improvement district that businesses are really keen to be engaged. I know that the Cabinet are clear that the plan as it goes out is a starter for 10 and it needs to be shaped by local people and local businesses. So there will be a huge engagement exercise around that. The challenge that you've got, though, is to make sure that, you know, we are still making things happen in the short term, because whilst it's great to get everybody signed up to a vision for the future, you know, people want to see things happening now. So I think when they come to talk to you about the master plan, there's also something about, and what are we doing in the short term to show that we've got, you know, show people we've got confidence that we can deliver it.
Do a quick follow-up. I think that's really important. So I think, you know, potentially there's going to be some grand ideas in this master plan, isn't there? And potentially the town centre could look massively different and have an impact for loads of people. I think we need that. We do need a vision for the town. But, you know, I'm sure if we can guess what some of the questions might be from people, some of the potential criticisms will be, actually, you can't keep the town clean and it's not safe to be there. So I guess it's ensuring that we're covering those bits, and that's something we'll be thinking about intrinsically in terms of that plan as well.
I think that is really important, and I think there's certainly, you know, the investment is there. You know, full council in February, the money was put in to help support. I think the challenge is to make sure that we're doing something that is tied back to how people feel about their town centre as it stands now, and to make sure that people are confident that it is safe and it is a place that they want to go to, and, you know, and to get on the front foot of all the positives that are going on in the town, and not just focus on some of the negative stuff.
On your Q4 report, you say about the orchestral concerts have seen an 18.8% drop in ticket sales, with anecdotally people saying they don't feel safe, and you've got a Street Angels scheme working. As somebody who goes to orchestral concerts, could I just say that if you sorted out the Market Hall car park on an evening, people would feel a lot safer? Okay, because you can feel unsafe because of the speeding cars that go around it, and the amount of people, cars and people that are in there that are not necessarily parked. So I think if you sorted out the market car park, people may feel safer.
I think going back to the conversation we had earlier about gangs in relation to place-based working, I think one of the really important priorities for us is how we have an ongoing engagement dialogue with people, so that actually some of those nuances that you don't get from a survey about how and why people don't feel safe is reflected through the work we're doing in terms of the place standard, and trying to get that kind of understanding of what's important to people and what drives that place, and that will be different in different bits of Huddersfield, but we want to become we want to be much better at getting that ongoing dialogue, so that we're not constantly going out and asking the same questions again and again, and that we can show real progress against that, and the master plan is definitely part of that.
I'm going to go back to Aspire and Achieve, because I'm just trying to navigate my way through the two reports and three bits. There are three reports in front of me. Right, we're looking at... there are no page numbers on that. It's the 62% of children achieving national standards for Key Stage 2. So that's in your in the executive summary for Q3, and it's in Q4. I don't think there's something linked to that in the corporate plan. So there's a couple of questions about that. The first one is, what's the story behind that? We know that Ofsted, the new Ofsted inspection framework is moving away from a target-driven approach, because Ofsted finally realised that's not always the best way to for children to achieve the best. Kirklees actually fits into that narrative very well, because we've got quite a wide and varied demographic. So the story behind the 62%, what using that target, continue to use that, what's going to look like for outcomes for our children and young people at the end of Key Stage 2, and again moving in to so that's the narrative behind it. The other thing is where we, how can we work as a council to make sure that we're getting the best outcomes for our children? How are we playing to the national things that are happening nationally, both around the school inspections and school organisation, to make sure we're getting the best outcomes for our children and young people? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think it's worth just reflecting that we have a new Director of Children's Services, and Mel has come in very clear that there is more that we could be doing to make sure we have the best outcomes for children. Certainly when it comes to attainment, we've done a big piece of work, which is the bit that you kind of alluded to, around how we are performing on a national level as well as a regional level. I think it is true to say there's more that we can do within the school system, and it is good to see that Ofsted are moving away from it's all about attainment, but actually there is something about, we've got some really good schools and we're doing quite a lot of it, but it's not consistent across the piece. So there's something about us really drilling down into that information to make sure that at Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4, that our children are achieving the best that they can. So, you know, Mel is having conversations across all of the school systems leadership to make sure that we're focusing on what does a resilient, successful child need to have, and how is that delivered not just through the school system but through the broader children provision.
And just to add, from the sort of performance regime that we've got now, obviously by flagging up some of these high-level statistics, because you're never going to get the level of detail in this sort of report that you might want, what the portfolio holder is doing is looking at areas they want to focus and drill down on to give them a better understanding of what's happening in terms of that performance. And obviously, as I came to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee last year about how we want this performance framework to support your work on your scrutiny panel. So if there's specific areas you want to work on and look at, then we can support you with that as well. Because as you say, Kirklees is such a diverse place that a headline figure across the district we know can mask a lot of inequality. So the important thing is that we can use some of these headlines to flag up areas we want to do that big, deep dive and get a bit more of an understanding.
I think one of the things we would like, I think, is the performance reports to lead members as soon as they're available, so that lead members can have a look and discuss with officers and discuss with the scrutiny panel if there's anything that they feel that needs to be picked up within scrutiny. And I think that would be good if the performance reports could be circulated as soon as they're available, Jackie.
Yeah, there's absolutely no problem with that. We'll make sure that happens as we carry on.
And I would want the scrutiny to look at all of the outcomes, because actually it's really important that we, you know, just because you're the children and young people's scrutiny lead doesn't mean to say it's just those two outcomes, because everything is connected. So if there's any areas that can impact on our children and families, then it's important to get that whole picture.
Anything on safe and cohesive that you've mentioned, guys? We've got anything else on there? I'd like to ask about modern day slavery network as well. You've got 2 items of progress on that. So is that something that is going to be a key item for the council moving forward? Modern day slavery network?
We're certainly still in a bit of a how we define the problem, because we know it's an issue, but we don't know enough about how much of an issue it is for the organisation. So we've obviously got links through our environmental health public protection services, but then also intelligence that comes through the police as well. So we're in the fact-finding stage at the moment. So certainly, you know, it'll be something that if it shows that we have a significant problem, then we'd obviously divert some activity to deal with that.
Okay, all right. Anything on clean and green? Kirklees Direct, capacity in Kirklees Direct. A lot of people say they have to wait quite a while to get through to certain areas of Kirklees Direct. Is that, and you have in your performance reports, you have the level of calls that Kirklees Direct are receiving. Is that something that you'll be looking at as to the capacity in Kirklees Direct over the next 12 months at all?
I think that's probably true of a number of areas of the council, actually, whereby capacity has been sort of budget driven rather than demand led. So I think that we'll certainly keep a watching brief on Kirklees Direct, and if those if the performance continues in that way, it would be something we would pick up.
That might be something that the corporate panel might want to pick up on anyway. Right, okay. Anything else then? Efficient and effective. Community outreach is mentioned on there. And inclusion and diversity. Employee networks. I know we've had something on employee networks a few times to this panel. Are they actually going to be, is there progress in properly supporting the employee networks and getting them off the ground?
We've just joined something called Inclusive Employers, which has a really helpful guide about what good employee networks look like, and we've done some work with all our networks doing a bit of a kind of review of how they work and how they operate, and there is a paper that is coming into our executive team within the next few weeks that identifies the findings from that. Looking at the initial report, there's certainly a huge amount of appetite to continue working on them, and I think with a few tweaks in terms of making sure that we reinforce the message of people being able to access those networks, they feel like a really positive thing that we need to embrace, and it looks like against that guidance that we do have very strong networks, and we've actually encouraged people to think about whether there's any other ones they want to create, because actually it's got to be driven by the staff themselves rather than something that we necessarily top down do.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to quickly say about the employee networks. I think they're crucial, really, aren't they? And it's a good level of challenge as well for senior members of the organisation as well to make sure we have those in place. So hopefully we'll see them thrive as we go forward. Can I just ask about the sickness levels? So this in Q3 report, there's sorry, I got a bit close there. There's specific employees that are mentioned from particular sectors where the sickness absence rate is quite high. So we're looking at support workers, cleaners, social workers, business support officers, catering assistants. Is there some trends that you can, between those members of staff that we can pick up? Is there some analysis that we've done on that? Why those 5 sectors in particular?
Yeah, absolutely, and again, it's sort of a similar point about this gives you that overview, but what we've done is quite detailed analysis about the kind of levels, frequency and types of sickness and absence in those groups, and we're tying that back to both our employer healthcare offer, but also, again, and I would say, how we prevent these things happening in the first place, because it's not necessarily about dealing with them when they occur. So we've been doing a lot more proactive workshops around different areas that has been highlighted as particular problems for us, and that's seeing huge take-up and huge positivity. And mental well-being more broadly of the workforce is one of the key priorities, and getting that support and that message that it's okay to talk about these things is critical, because that is helping in terms of those sickness absence rates going down over a long period of time.
So just to add to that, I think if you look at the sickness stats over the past couple of years, there's been a marked improvement in terms of staff access and help earlier, coming back to work on a more kind of thoughtful way. I think one of the challenges that we've got is in the next 12 months is successful organisations have staff that are engaged, and if you've got engaged staff, then your sickness levels go down, and you've got a whole host of things, don't you? So coming back to your point about the networks, it is really, really important that we've got staff who can talk to senior leaders in the organisation, tell us how it feels. We do an awful lot as an executive team of getting out there and not having 10 people tell you something. Go out and talk to frontline staff yourself. So some of the sickness work that we've done has come directly from the kind of interventions that on the front line people were asking for, which is ahead of of them going off sick, will help them with posture and those kind of things. So I'm quite pleased with what we've done around sickness, but there's still more to do.
Just a quick follow-up. I mean, could we say that this is perhaps down to long hours, or do people feel they're getting paid the right levels, or it might not be something you can go into detail right now, I understand, but you'll probably have that sort of level of understanding from me.
I think we do, and it's probably worth at some stage, if it doesn't happen as a matter of course, we do employee surveys as well. So we've just had, it's it's hot off the press actually. We've just had one done, which seems it shows us going in the right direction. So even though austerity has been really difficult for lots of staff, I think what we've managed to try to do now is to kind of see those areas where resources have been a challenge and are put undue pressure and start to invest in some of them. So I'm hoping that will have an impact on some of the areas that we've talked about.
Thank you. Right then, so we covered the performance reports then, and can we look now at the forward plan? And can I just say that your forward plan goes 1st of June to 31st of October. Now, I don't know about everybody else, but I remember forward plans that used to say, we've got something coming up, and it would be a month when it was coming for a key decision, right? So it might be something, we used to do this, that we used to say, right, a key decision A is due in October, key decision B is due in September. Your forward plan of key decisions is basically what's on tomorrow's cabinet agenda, and a key decision, one key decision for July and one key decision for August. So do you want to comment on how you're operating your forward plan of key decisions, please, so that we understand? Because it is more agenda list than a forward plan at the minute.
I think that's a fair challenge, Councillor Smage. Where we are at the moment is, obviously, we've got a new cabinet who's only just come into being. They'll need to go back and revisit their list from last year and their priorities, and then make sure that they have covered off what they want to and add to that list, which is what I suspect they will do. Once that's happened, then what happens then is that goes into executive team so that we can start to do that forward plan around when decisions need to be taken. So we're happy to share that once it'll be in the next couple of weeks. I know Cabinet are meeting next week to have a look at their priorities.
We could have that to lead members, that would be good as soon as it's available for us, okay? And then if there's anything coming up that lead members want to discuss with officers on the key decisions and bring forward to panel, then that can be done. Okay. Right, so is there anything, before we get into the different work panels draft, is there anything that you feel that Scrutiny should be looking at that's a key thing coming up in the next 12 months that Scrutiny should be looking at? I have a couple of things, including waste strategy, but do you what is that on your list? So do you have anything else that you think we should be considering?
So I had a quick look at the forward plan, and it is always difficult, isn't it, when Scrutiny kind of never stops, and so you to take a moment and say, is this the right plan? So it's important we do that. I think for me there are probably 3 or 4 things which are really critical this year. One is around the development of place-based working, because that will become actually the partnerships operational model of service delivery for the next 5-10 years. So there's something about being in on the front foot for that as that starts to develop. The waste strategy is hugely important, because what we will end up doing is, as a result of the opportunity of the end of the contract, completely look at a new waste collection service going forward. That needs to be owned by not only politicians but by local residents, because it will be very, very different to the service that we currently deliver, which is obviously not good enough in today's recycling rates and those kind of things. So it's really important that that ties into the national strategy, and I'd really ask Scrutiny to play a really key part in that. The other thing I think is important, though, so in terms of the Council's financial strategy going forward, there are probably 3 areas where it causes me some concern about have we got enough money in the budget going forward, because these are the areas of pressure. So one is waste, the other one is placements, and the third one is high needs. And if we can actually work with Scrutiny to make sure that we're doing all we can on being able to strategically predict the demand so that we've got enough in the reserves to be able to sort through the transition, that would be really helpful.
Right then, so if we look at the work plans for the various panels and bring those items in as we feel that we should need, because I think there may be a crossover between a couple of them, so the high needs and the placements, there may be a crossover between panels and the finance. So it might be that panels need to work together a bit on those, okay? Right, okay. Health and adult social care scrutiny. Unfortunately, the lead member's given apologies. However, the former lead member, I myself, will say that this is a continuation of the work plan that's going forward. It was assessed in April by the panel, and there is a panel meeting tomorrow where they'll be looking at it. On this work plan, there is a split for panel to look at items, for the lead member to have briefings and keep up to date and take anything back to the panel. So, for instance, recommendations, etc., that may have come from previous work, lead member briefings, monitor those, and monitoring items where maybe, like we had a review of mental health assessments, and that's an ad hoc, and that reports back every so often on the recommendations. There are a couple of new things on there. The response times for Yorkshire Ambulance Service, which we talked about last municipal year about having on, and primary care networks, which is good, which is new rather, and the maternity network as well. Okay, so that's sort of a rolling thing. I did wonder if other work plans could be looked at to see where the lead member needs to just keep a monitoring on some of the items rather than keep coming back to panels. I think that might be helpful in relation to the work plan. Okay. Children's scrutiny panel then. Anything that you want to say, Andrew, at this point in time?
Not this one. We're meeting on the 19th of July. I've got a meeting with Mel Meggs and John Sanders next Monday to have a full briefing about some of the things we'd like to be looking at next municipal year.
And placements, I think, will be, if you can consider that, Andrew, as well, and the issue on placements that was raised. Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I do see the crossover between financial and children's. Interesting conversation. Actually, new councillor induction about potential things we could be doing to get better outcomes, primarily for our children and young people, but actually, at a reduced use of resource or a more effective use of resource. Yeah.
Yeah, and presumably high needs as well, because your placements and high needs will be both children's and adults. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think there is something actually about, because we struggle with this a little bit as well from an executive team point of view. There are a number of issues which are cross-council, aren't they? And our scrutiny processes lead to leads on particular things. I just do wonder whether it's worth, as chairs, reflecting on how are you going to handle some of that stuff, just so it's easier for us to navigate. Because we do need to look at it in the round. It's not just about children, it's not just about adults, it's about people.
Yes, and we'll let the adults panel know for tomorrow as well about that. There is some new guidance that's come out for scrutiny panels, and we're wondering about having a workshop to look at how we deal with that. There's things that we do and things that we could perhaps do differently, and so getting together on that and how we move it forward. So this cross-working between panels as well would be something that could be discussed as part of that as well. Okay, all right. But we need to the specifics. The placements and high needs are specifics at this moment in time, which we need to talk about between children's and adults. Okay. All right then. On children's though, there's nothing on youth services. Is there something that we want to reflect on youth services at all? I didn't see anything.
There isn't. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of things on there for monitoring. I really do want to go through it, and again, in the light of some of what we've talked about in the corporate plan and performance plan, actually look at what's the most effective stuff for the whole panel to be looking at. I mean, again, with some of the mental health stuff, there's potential for youth services to be taking a part of that. I think that's mentioned, but it needs to be. Yeah. We'll have a good look through it and then report back to management panel and to officers as well. Okay.
I think that scrutiny is at its most effective before decisions are taken. And so actually, and pre-scrutiny work's really, really important. It does feel like in the children's portfolio, there is an awful lot of opportunity around pre-scrutiny because we are redesigning and remodelling an awful lot of the activity. There was this youth summit that Rachel referred to previously a few weeks back, which was incredibly well attended, and there's a real desire for us looking at youth provision to tie back to all the things we talked about in terms of gun and knife crime and a whole host of other outcomes. So I think there is a real opportunity on youth services, particularly how that links back to local places and what we're trying to achieve at local level to kind of do some really thoughtful pre-scrutiny work in that space.
I think we would like to do more pre-decision scrutiny work. That's an absolute, yeah, we would. Therefore we need to work closely with officers to ensure that we're bringing things at the right time to the scrutiny panels. Yeah, Andrew, do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I can bring some previous experience of actually working with, as an executive, as a cabinet member with scrutiny, and actually my preference from that side would have been to work with scrutiny as early as possible. Also cross-cutting stuff as well as previous experience. Just want to make sure that in terms of the scrutiny work programme, given that we've got we've not got limited resources to actually make sure that's happening as effectively as possible. Yeah.
And also where there's major consultations in the council are undertaking, coming to scrutiny and to discuss with the lead member about those consultations, and if the scrutiny panel wants to have a look at the communications plan and the materials, etc., before they go out. Obviously, coming from a health and social care panel, we did quite a bit of that because that's what you have to do in health. So it might be worth in the council as well, if there is a large consultation, actually scrutiny, having a look at it. We did in adult social care scrutiny. We did, and I think the panel felt that it had been useful to do that. Okay, so corporate then. I think the corporate lead member is not here today, but it's split, isn't it, between that and the financial scrutiny work programme. And I would also say about risks as well. We don't want to duplicate the corporate governance and audit committee, but maybe risks, finance and risk as well needs to perhaps be considered. And the financial strategy comes into that as well, doesn't it? Yeah. So we'll ask if the financial strategy could be looked at as part of that. Economy and neighbourhoods then.
Thank you, Chair. So I recently met with Carl Battersby, the lead officer for this, and we went through the plan with him. It's in the paper, so I don't want to go through the whole thing. It's still in draft, and we'll need to take it to the committee as well and see what panel members have to say about it. The waste strategy is on there, and that's one of the key things that we did discuss. You know, particularly with the collection services and obviously with the national draft strategy and the strategy that we've got in place. I think that's really important. One of the things I'd like to consider alongside that is around fly tipping and litter. I know some of our stats are quite average actually, but we've got particular hotspot areas, and it's looking at what kind of specific work we're doing on that. Did you want to say anything on that?
I think it's the overarching Kirklees issue as well, though, isn't it? About actually whenever you average up, everything just looks okay. But actually there are areas, aren't there, where we know we've got issues. So I think any work that scrutiny can do that can help sort of officers think through that would be really helpful.
Great. And it says something about your area. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if councillors or residents raise issues about that, to actually take that serious. I mean, I know we do take stuff, but actually, occasionally councils have flagged up and said it's not been as taken as serious as it ought to be doing. And actually, what's turned out is there has been an underlying issue. It's just in a particular place, not across the whole of the borough. And that's, yeah, a bit of investigation is sometimes very helpful.
I think you're spot on there, and like you say, there's other issues behind it, isn't there, a lot of the time. And it says something about you know, what do we think about that place? You know, what different organisations think about the place that I live? So I think you're spot on, mate. Yeah, sorry, I said mate there, but I said mate. Went a bit casual there for a moment. So I know. There you go. We obviously got the skills and digital strategy, which we're hoping to look at together. Skills obviously a key one. One of the things I'd like to do overall with the economy and neighbourhood panel is make sure we're looking at overall the strand around equality and how we're tackling the gap in Kirklees. A discussion that I'll have with panel members, but I think that's really important, so I'm hoping to do that overall. That said, I don't really want to go into too much detail right now because it's still in draft. Is that all right?
It's okay. I'm just wondering, because instead of waste strategy, you've got waste minimisation. And I'm just wondering about being a little bit more specific, that you look at the waste strategy as an ongoing thing. I think that perhaps might be useful so that it's clear on the work plan that that's actually what you're looking at, so that you're looking at it in the round as well. I wonder if that would be helpful. And I notice when we get to the corporate plan, there's things on homelessness. And there is something on the work plan about preventing homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. But I think there looks to be further work that is ongoing on homelessness and the housing, appropriate housing, and etc. So there's a whole area there that maybe you want to have a look at. And K&H, the governance of K&H.
I think you're spot on there, really. One of the things I'm hoping to do is meet with Naz Parker and Sue Westerby. Have I got that right? Yeah, Weston, sorry about that. And I think I want to sit down with them and have a think about the areas that we focus on, but I think all the points that you've raised there are key. And with the Homelessness Reduction Act, which was in the performance reports, I know it's saying at the moment it's quite difficult to figure out where we are because the stats aren't necessarily there nationally. So I'd like to sort of dig down on that a little bit as well, and just be a little bit clearer on what's going on with the Hackett review, but maybe that's one that I do as a lead member and sort of follow up rather than as a whole panel issue.
So if we move to the main committee then, it is draft, and I would like to have more discussions with officers on these items as well, to see what can be monitoring and what can be items for discussion. So we've got the scrutiny of crime and disorder, and it's a statutory requirement. We have one meeting per year on that, and I would like to include modern day slavery in that as well. So we have an item on we had gang strategy, domestic violence and CCTV last time. I think we need domestic violence again, but also can we have a look and see what you're doing on modern day slavery? So sort of have a theme to that meeting. Corporate plan is today. Flood risk is an item that keeps coming up. Regional working update. Now this it was proposed in March that we receive quarterly updates on regional working. Do we fully understand the full implications of regional working and what regional working is across West Yorkshire, etc.? I think it would be useful if, as a committee, we could have information on the Combined Authority and the LEP and the work that Kirklees is involved in relation to that. I think, would that be helpful if we had that understanding?
If anybody answered the question, yes, I fully understand the opportunity of regional working. I'd hesitate. I think probably the timing of that is quite useful, actually, the challenge of that, because we're in the middle of a LEP review. Conversations are ongoing about what that might look like. I think a bit of a reminder around the devolution agenda and what the current task is would probably be useful for scrutiny as well, so we're happy to programme that in.
Okay, maybe I should say that I've been on the Scrutiny Committee on WICA for a few months as well. So that's why I can see that there's a definite need to have it on the agenda. Okay. No. Transformation programme, I think we perhaps need to discuss that in more detail. We've got update on youth provision, but I think if children's panel is looking at that, then we need to work that. Migration, resettlement work, scrutiny, performance information. Well, we've discussed that about lead members monitoring the performance more as well, and inclusion and diversity, that keeps coming up. Supporting communities work stream. Now, this is about working with communities, voluntary and third sector towards receiving a common aim. Your place-based work would go in there as well, wouldn't it? So we could do some work around that. Okay. And lead member reports. Is everybody all right with bringing a report on? It's not every meeting, every other meeting. All right, but I think we need to have a discussion more on what the management committee can look at in greater detail that panels are not picking up. Okay. All right, so those are in draft at the minute. Once the panels have met and gone through the work plan, then we can have the finalised work plans. Okay. All right, thank you for that. And you'll look at your key decisions for our plans. Well, yeah, that's it. Right. So let's move swiftly on to draft corporate plan, because this is going to Cabinet tomorrow. So if there's anything that we want to, any comments we want to make, maybe they can, the Cabinet can be informed. Oh, just moving back to scrutiny work programme, mentioning about asking Cabinet members to come to your meetings to say their priorities, and this committee needs to invite Councillor Pando. Okay, all right. Okay, so corporate plan then. Right. Do you want to say anything as a means of introduction? Thank you.
Okay, so as you've got a copy in front of you, just as a reminder, the corporate plan was approved in July 2018 and it was a 2-year plan. But what we wanted to do was the planned refresh this year so that we could make sure it remained current in terms of reflecting our current and any new priorities, and also to give a bit of an overview of delivery today against what we've set out in the last plan. As you alluded to, in terms of following the same format in relation to reflecting those 7 shared Kirklees outcomes and the 8th Kirklees Council outcome in terms of being effective and efficient. The 3 important components of where Kirklees is around people, place and partners. So the place-based working, which we've discussed a little bit today, how we're working in partnership as being the way that we're going to do that most effectively, and also that how we put a working with rather than doing to approach to how we engage with both our staff and our communities as well as elected members. So what we've done as well in the document this year is highlighted some case studies and some examples from staff in terms of how they're contributing to the delivery of that Where Kirklees journey, and in terms of how they can see how they're contributing to those overarching outcomes, which is obviously really important to become a council that works a lot more collaboratively rather than service silos. So that's kind of all I wanted to say, really. Hopefully the document itself is self-explanatory, and as I said, I'd be interested to take any comments, because as you say, it's going to Cabinet tomorrow and then it'll be full council in July.
Right then, so mentioned in the introduction is about inclusive growth being a priority. So how are you ensuring that inclusive growth is across the board in the council, is taken consideration of? Because it's mentioned at the forward, but then how is it included in all of the rest?
I I think with inclusive growth, it's one of those things, isn't it, where there's been a bit of a kind of national focus on it as being a key kind of buzzword. What we've tried to do in Kirklees is to say, what does that genuinely mean for us as a district and an organisation? So things like how we tackle poverty, for example, will be part of how we look at inclusive growth. So you might not see the word inclusive growth against each of the outcomes, but things like how we're looking at social value across our key anchor organisations and with our partners is part of that inclusive growth agenda. The work we're doing around supporting healthy holidays and other agendas in terms of tackling poverty is also part of that inclusive growth. And we've got a Kirklees Inclusive Growth steering group which the leader chairs, which looks at how we can ensure that we're considering that across all our activities. So it is there, but it's not as explicit in terms of referring it back to inclusive growth, because it is quite a multifaceted agenda.
And inclusive growth comes from the combined authority as well in the LEP, doesn't it? So maybe when we're discussing that agenda, inclusive growth as pertaining to Kirklees might be included as well, yeah?
Yeah, so the leader leads on a regional basis on inclusive growth as well, which I think is really helpful because it puts a lot of challenge back into Kirklees to make sure that we're delivering across it. I think it's probably worth reflecting as well that most authorities in the region have also updated their economic strategies, and we've just done the same, and that's very much from let's move away from a drip down kind of economy and one to where actually we're tackling poverty. We're looking at earnings across the piece going up, not just for the top 5%. So it's part of all of our strategies really. We just don't tend to use the phrase too often.
And I noticed as well you've split it up, so over the last year you have, we'll continue to, and with further emphasis on, and you're hoping to achieve. So when I looked at last year's corporate plan and this year's corporate plan, I noticed on some of them there are things that will continue to, but over the last year it's not obvious that you have started some of the items that are in the corporate plan to achieve. And the further emphasis doesn't look as if those are included. I think there's 3 areas where there's an example in each. So are there items which are yet to be started, and why haven't they got some emphasis on them, I think?
I think in terms of how we've actually structured it, what we wanted to make sure is we reflected that continuity from last year. So as you say, that we will continue to, and how we will measure are the same as what was in the last one. My colleagues behind who have been working hugely hard on this have also done a cross-check and a supporting document that has much more detail around what we have done in relation to those areas we've said we will focus on. We were quite strict in terms of trying to limit the information that went in there. So we have got that, and that will be provided to the full council discussion at the end of July as well to reinforce that. In terms of those areas of new priority, some of those are about things that we know are potentially a problem, but we don't know the size and scale of it yet, but we want to put that in as sometimes I think we focus on the doing rather than the understanding the problem, and it's important as an organisation that is intelligence-led that we are spending time understanding what the problems are, and then we will work out how that reflects in action going forward. So it isn't as well laid out as you would imagine, but that's because it can't possibly do justice to the amount of work that's going on. And as I said, my colleagues have been working on making sure we've got all of those things answered for when it goes to full council.
Right, so maybe if we're looking at the corporate plan in relation to performance and etc. in scrutiny, it might be worth us having a look at that document to leave members as well, in case somebody else goes and compares last year's version with this year's version. Okay. The other point I had is CSE. I don't see CSE explicitly said. Is it there in the corporate plan, but not? I might have missed it, but where is it in all of this that you're going to continue work on CSE?
So I suppose we don't. CSE is hugely important and obviously something that we will continue to work on. But we're looking at exploitation more broadly, and it's not just about child sexual exploitation. So I think it's from that perspective. And it's also about improving outcomes for children. It's not just kind of focusing in on a very narrow issue.
It's just when you looked at it, I couldn't really see. So that's why I was asking sort of what it was. I might have missed it if you've used other words, but I think, you know, it needs to be.
I think wherever we refer to safeguarding responsibility, it's all of it. Yeah, it's all of it in the round.
Sorry. I think what I like about this is that it's short and you've broken it up, you know, in the sense that sometimes I think we can drown ourselves in words and try and hide things, and I think in ways you've broken up really well, and it's clear what you're saying, and it's good that on each one you've got the measuring our impact. In terms of the bits where you said what we're aiming to achieve, you know, things like more and better quality jobs, create the environment to enable major generation access. So the only thing I'd say about those bits is there's potential where we could be a little bit more specific on some of those things. And again, I think part of that, you've probably worded like this to make it a little bit easy for people to, you know, to get it across to people. But it's perhaps just trying to think about other bits there where we could be a little bit more specific on that. And for example, in the sustainable economy section, we talk about developing and delivering a local wealth building programme. But really, for me, I don't think we do enough to big that up. I think, you know, it's in quite a bit of a small section, and actually I think this potentially can make such an improvement to local people and our economy. So there'd be little things like that I'd want to see a little bit more emphasis on that. And then just generally, I think you've talked about how do we look at things in the round, and I think there's something to say about that overall. You know, how do we put more emphasis about what we're doing to tackle not only poverty but inequalities, really. I think that's one of the key challenges for most of us in society today, really. So, you know, how are we clearly showing that in this report as well?
Can I just pick up the issue of it being a short report? So this is what my third corporate plan, is it third now? Third corporate plan. And so everyone said when I first started, the corporate plan's too long, so I put a plan on a page. Everybody said, I hate the plan on a page, so we then added more. I think, so each time, I think the plan gets better for the feedback that we get. I think I completely agree with you. There is something about us being really clear about the metrics of which we're going to decide whether we've succeeded or not. And we're still, if we're being honest, behind the scenes, still trying to work through. So what does that better quality jobs look like? You know, what would be the measure of that? So there's something about that will be the next iteration. But I think it's useful to have the feedback about, in doing that, what we don't want to do though is miss, you know, everything in the round, because actually when you put all of those things together, there's a really positive story in terms of performance and about what we've been achieving over the past couple of years, but there's still more to do.
Yeah, just a couple of things on the children and young people. Page 6, looking forward to the relaunching and reshaping the Children and Young People's Partnership, really important. Need to be really clear about why people, you know, from those who are there and how they're going to help to contribute to the outcomes we want to achieve. Because again, in past experiences, a lot of people got lots to contribute. We just need to be clear about that. So I think that's, and again, that probably links in with how the points in here link to the outcomes and how we're going to monitor the effectiveness of that. So that's good. And then just one other point. Page 12, apprenticeships. So, yeah, love apprenticeships, think they're really good. That's the council being an exemplar of how we do it, but also recognise, I mean, particularly in relation to manufacturing, Kirklees, third largest manufacturing district in the whole of the country. National recognition that we still make a lot more stuff than we thought we did. And we know that after retail, it's manufacturing companies are crying out for anybody to come and work with them, and particularly get young people enthused about making stuff and actually recognise it as a different pathway to really successful achievement. You know, they don't have to at 16 go to college, or they could do college alongside work, so it's practical, you know, more practical. So that, like the fact it's in there, it's what are the wider implications for the, you know, the thousands of children in Kirklees who that might be a suitable route, and employers who want people to come and work for them.
So I suppose there's two aspects to the apprenticeship programme which are worth picking up. One is around making sure, like you quite rightly say, that in the areas and the sectors that we know workforce planning is an issue, or you know, we're intending to expand, that we've got the right kind of jobs in order to enable that to happen. The second bit, though, is also about the council's role in a leadership way in terms of the jobs that the council has. I'm really passionate about this. I think there's something about the fact that, you know, coming back to, I think the point that's been made about inequality across the borough, there's a real opportunity to tie that programme in to those people who will probably find it most difficult to get an apprenticeship, you know, whether it be from sort of, you know, deprived backgrounds, whether it be ethnicity issues. There's a whole host of ways that we can tie the council programme into making sure that that's the areas of preference that we're trying to achieve. So there's quite a bit of work been done on that already. More will be developed over the next 12 months, but it is a real opportunity.
Air quality, absolutely, and the crossovers to health and wellness need to be emphasised as well, I think. But can we look at page 18? You're clean and green. Over the last year, you have established a new garden waste collection system, delivering 10,500 brown bins with high rates of public uptake. Yeah. The next bit, and delivered an education programme for residents about what can and can't be recycled by checking each of the 9,000 bins across Kirklees. Is that right? You've checked 9,000 bins across Kirklees. Because as I understood it, you're checking recycling in South Kirklees, but you've been delayed in North Kirklees. And would there be more than 9,000 bins across Kirklees? Yes. So is that actually right? Do you want to have a look at it and to actually check that is what you've done? Andrew, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, and it's the education bit as well, because getting a lot of feedback from residents who've, so just like to know how much engagement, face-to-face engagement has gone on with residents about following, yeah.
Can I just pick that up, because I know it's quite topical. I think the 9,000 figure's probably right, actually. I think that's the kind of level of engagement that we've done. So when they say educate residents, I think what we've done so far is put stickers on to remind people what can go in the bin. For the majority of residents, that's been enough. You know, people have kind of just self-regulated, and the bins have been good. And then where we've had problems, we've gone into areas, and despite what you might read in the press, I think what we've done is a lot of activity at a local level in those areas. You know, people have been door knocking, they've been followed up with phone conversations. There's been a whole host of things that have been going on about trying to make that quite understood. And then only when that's happened time after time after time, only in those circumstances have those servers gone and taken the bin away. And I think that has been the challenge, because I think you're right. I think the messaging about kind of the education programme isn't out there at all. It just looks like we've gone from, you put things in your bin, they're not right, and we're taking your bin away. I can just assure members that's not the case.
But I think it's important, because it is a sensitive issue, that the wording in your corporate plan reflects what people has understood is happening, but is a little bit clearer around the item. Certainly for decision tomorrow, I would have thought that would be needed. But change slightly there. Is there anything else that we want to bring out? So on this, you've talked about this is what you're going to do, and then how you're going to do it and the assessment that you are going to make sure that what you said you're going to achieve, you've achieved. Certainly there's one programme in here that I know it says that ran last year that makes me wonder what assessment has been done as to its impact and how it can be improved for this year. It was the Expand, Fit and Fed. Because I think in some areas it worked, in other areas perhaps had a different response, and so you're continuing it, yes, but it's how you improve from one year to the next and how you making those assessments on those programs. So where are those discussions happening? Are those happening in the services, or are they being monitored on a corporate level, Rich?
I think with something where it says expand a programme, obviously it won't give the level of detail around that being about understanding, as you say, where it's had impact, where it hasn't had impact, where we need to focus a little bit more broadly. I mean, I think in terms of the whole corporate plan, if we don't get that sense of actually Kirklees is a diverse borough and we will potentially do different things because of that, of the need and the assets within that community, then that needs to be across the whole board with this. With Fit and Fed, what we're doing is trying to look at that across council, so it's a multi-agency stakeholder group plus across different council directorates, because we've moved on from the days where we look at that within a specific service, so we're getting more and more initiatives that are corporate in the sense of lots of different bits of the council contributing. One of the things we need to ensure is that we've got the right information corporately to support that, but also that we're working better with our partners to make sure we've got a more consistent response across that, so that we're looking at Kirklees from a systems perspective, not just from a council's perspective. So it's being looked at both within the specific services, because it relates to the outcome, but also corporately in terms of getting a sense of the impact that we're having for those programmes.
And also on independent on page 10, you've got about Kirklees Libraries promoting the Looking Out for Our Neighbours campaign, and then you've got about how many books and e-books and audiobooks and magazines and newspapers were lent, and absolutely yes. But what about all the other contributions libraries have made over the 12 months to the council's aims and objectives? And so my comment there is perhaps the contribution that libraries make to a whole range of areas could perhaps be better described than just the number of books that have been lent.
And I think it's that balance, isn't it, in terms of sometimes you need some metrics in to show some numbers of things to try and show the scale. But I think referring to that document I mentioned earlier that tries to give a bit more flavour to what we've achieved, libraries will feature writ large in that around all of the outcomes. This is focused on the independent, but as you know, prevention, early intervention, it's huge in that. So sometimes it's important to put metrics in, and sometimes it perhaps doesn't do it justice, but hopefully the supporting document will give some extra colour to that in terms of what we've done.
And also, what about carers? I know I say it every year as far as the corporate plan is concerned, but the contribution that carers make to the services, is there something in the document that is about support for carers at all?
I'll take it away about whether it's in the document, but obviously it is a huge council priority, so I'd be surprised if we've missed it, but we could have done that, so we'll just take that away.
Anything else? No? All right, thank you very much. I think we've a few things there. Check that wording. Okay, thank you. Right, Scrutiny Communications then. This is just to say that, as usual, any media or press releases need to come through the chair of the management committee that you have. The Scrutiny Bulletin goes out 3 times a year, and we report to Council. The next opportunity is September, and hopefully our scrutiny item will not get timed out of Council. It is a hope, anyway. because we've been on a couple of times and not managed to give a feedback. So it might be worth actually if we have something in writing so that if we don't get to the...
Because aren't there ongoing discussions about, through Democracy Commission or something, about the shape of councils? So if that's really, at least we can make presentations and say if this is important, it's a fixed item. Yeah.
And I actually wondered, talking about the Democracy Commission, if members would like to hear what the Democracy Commission work has been happening to the Management Committee. Yeah? Having an update? Yeah? Good way. All right. And schedule of meetings. July, there's one in July, it's not listed there. 22nd of July is the next one, and we'll look to see if Monday's still working for everybody. But the dates will be published. 22nd of July will be the next one. The September one is the 9th of September. All right. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.